Just 2 days to go until polls close into the Labour leadership contest, and Jeremy Corbyn is still the front-runner, much to the chagrin of many Labour MPs. But has the process been flawed, as some have claimed, or is it just all sour grapes? Here's Ellie.
I am truly sorry I did not succeed. I've done my best for nearly 5 years. Now you need to show your responsibility. Your responsibility, not simply to mourn our defeat, but to pick yourself up and continue the fight.
Ed Miliband's decision to stand down here at 1 Great George Street on May the 8th obviously thrust Labour into a leadership battle. But his decision to change the way that leader could be elected may have had a more significant and potentially unintended bearing on who will follow him. He had been elected amid claims the unions had too much influence, so the electoral college system was supposedly simplified to 1 member, 1 vote, with the public allowed to take part for a £3 fee by becoming affiliate supporters. To begin with, at least all 4 of the leadership candidates were pleased with the new system. It seemed to have massively increased the party's membership and support base. At the general election, Labour had just over 200,000 full members. There were suddenly more than 610,000 people who were sent a ballot to vote for the new leader. But some moderates say it's had the opposite effect to that intended.
They thought ordinary voters who would be less left-wing than the average Labour Party member would sign up and join. Instead, it's actually appealed to a set of people that didn't want to make the commitment of being full party members because they disagreed with the Labour Party from a position to its left. So it's enfranchised a bunch of people that are more left-wing than the full members are.
And then, of course, there were charges the system was being abused by other parties, keen to vote for Jeremy Corbyn to become new leader for their own reasons, as well as trying to test Labour's vetting system. This family of llamas were barred. It may have had something to do with their Conservative owners. Labour says it's weeded out more than 4,000 infiltrators from rival parties or organisations. And yet, a new word has been invented: Corbyn mania. The veteran Labour MP, who wasn't even going to be in the contest, has dominated.
Of the kind of ideas, of the kind of society that we all want to live in.
According to a poll by SurveyMonkey given to the BBC, Jeremy Corbyn is the top choice for 53% of eligible voters asked, which meant he wouldn't need to worry about second preference votes and would win outright. And what's maybe more alarming for anyone hoping to get a Labour victory in 2020, 57% of the nearly 2,300 Labour supporters surveyed say they would prefer a leader who best represents the party's core values, regardless of how electable that leader might be. In fact, those same supporters put Andy Burnham and Yvette Cooper well ahead of Mr Corbyn when it comes to the candidate most likely to win a general election. But as that last election demonstrated, polls may be little more than hot air. We'll know on Saturday who succeeds Ed Miliband. How Labour succeeds from then is a much bigger question.
And we're joined now by the Labour MP Simon Danczuk, and Ed Miliband's former advisor Tom Baldwin is of course still with us. And we did try to speak to a Jeremy Corbyn supporter this lunchtime, but none of the MPs we contacted were available in these closing days. Yes, you're looking surprised there, Simon Danczuk. They're obviously lying low for the last few days. Parliamentary Labour Party met last night, last time before the new leader is announced. Were you one of those MPs calling for a return to elections to the shadow cabinet?
No, I wasn't, but it was a very consensual meeting, as you would hope for. People were very much in agreement. There was some discussion about whether we should move back to having elections for the shadow cabinet, and the feeling within the meeting was that there was no strong desire for that. So
right.
It's for the leader to choose who.
Because some of Jeremy Corbyn's supporters certainly suspected ulterior motives, that the idea would be to restore elections to the shadow cabinet to prevent him appointing everyone.
I think they need to be less suspicious about these things. People in the PLP, the Parliamentary Labour Party, will get behind whoever becomes leader on Saturday.
And does that include you? Because we had thought that if Jeremy Corbyn becomes leader, that you will be one of those who would react and leave the party.
No, there's no truth in those rumours. I am quite clear. I spoke to Jeremy yesterday, in actual fact, and we're going to meet for a coffee later this week. I am quite clear that if he becomes leader, then then I will support him.
Have you changed your mind? Because you favoured a tweet which said that you would quit the party.
No, I'm quite clear. I'm going to stay within the Labour Party, as I have been for 20 odd years, and we will support him, and he'll be judged on his performance. If he's doing well, he'll carry on doing well and lead us into the 2020 general election, but all eyes will be on him. And what he has to remember, I think, is that he's only there for the grace of other members of the Parliamentary Labour Party who put him on the ballot paper.
Yes,
and
what do you think of those colleagues who actually put him there, who said they didn't actually support him, but they felt it was important to have him as part of the debate? Was that a big mistake? John McTernan, actually, a former Labour spin doctor, described those people as morons. How would you describe them?
Well, I certainly wouldn't describe colleagues in the PLP as morons, but I've spoken to a number of them, and they're certainly regretful about the decision that they made. There's no doubt about that. The truth is the system doesn't work. We've been bequeathed a terrible system. We didn't necessarily realise it would play out like this, but it clearly hasn't worked.
Right, well, and you were part of that leadership that bequeathed that system, and it hasn't worked.
Well, lots of mistakes were made in the last Parliament, but this was not one of them. I'm very clear that the old system was broken. People talk about entryism under the new system. The old system institutionalised entryism by hundreds of thousands of people. In the trade union section of the Electoral College, Conservatives, UKIP supporters, BNP supporters, nationalists were all given the right to vote. That's gone. MPs having multiple votes, that's gone. Trade union general secretaries having undue influence, that's gone. This is a system designed to open up the Labour Party. And frankly, I saw you the other day calling for Ed Miliband to apologise for this new system. I think that's disgraceful. We have a system which is designed to open up the Labour Party, and if you're losing an election, be it a leadership election or a general election, the solution is not to complain about too many people voting. Go out and win some more votes.
To be quite honest, I think Ed Miliband has more than just this to apologise for. He'll probably go down as one of the worst Labour Party leaders in history. He takes us into a disastrous general election and performs very badly. He bequeaths us this system that clearly doesn't work. I'm not saying the old system worked either. He gives permission to the far left in the party to have the space to develop as they have done. And he should apologise for those things. He was critical of people who were trying to push him to be stronger on immigration and welfare, and he was critical of those people. There are so many things he should apologise for. He's been one of the worst Labour leaders we've ever had.
What system are you proposing for the election of Labour leader? Because you're critical of the old system and the new system.
It could be tweaked. I mean, you could have a cut-off. It could be changed slightly so that you have a cut-off date by when you can vote, and that's what we have in every other selection process within the Labour Party.
But, John, would you not accept that this system, rightly or wrongly, has led, as Simon Danczuk said, created space for someone like Jeremy Corbyn, as I say, rightly or wrongly, to come into a leadership and actually end up as the front runner?
No, what I think is that the Corbyn campaign saw that this was an opportunity to recruit people, registered supporters, affiliated supporters, members who backed him, and too many people from the mainstream of the Labour Party were complaining about the rules or turning in themselves rather than actually going out and signing up people themselves. And I think when people come and blame Ed Miliband or blame everybody else for what's happening, they actually need to stop and look in a mirror and wonder why modernisers weren't signing up people as well.
Has it not led to infiltration, though? I mean, we've had to weed out 4,000 or so people whom the Labour Party doesn't regard as genuine voters in this contest. So that does suggest a major flaw.
Well, as I say, in the old system, there were probably about 1 million people who had a right to vote in the trade union section who voted for other parties in the previous general election.
Right, but I mean, you say opening up the system to a new generation of Labour supporters, but it has allowed people to come in to register, to pay just £3 and become registered supporters with no sense of history, no sense of belonging, no sense of having 6 months even before they were allowed to vote in a major election like this.
Well, these are about putting, what you seem to be suggesting is putting barriers in the way of people getting engaged in politics. I mean, nobody complained about the New Hampshire primary in America that registered Democrats, where you don't have to pay a penny to vote.
But haven't you got a lot more new members?
But it's completely different, isn't it? Because we're picking a leader of a political party. We're not picking somebody to stand for election as a member of Parliament or something. I agree that there are advantages to primaries and things, but this is completely different. I did analysis of those who were paying £3 in Rochdale in my constituency, and a third of them who were registering as supporters didn't vote Labour last time. And it's clearly infiltration by some people in an attempt to get a far left candidate elected as leader of the Labour Party. And that, you know, packing the electorate isn't democracy. And that's what we've got at the moment.
You could have been signing up people from the mainstream support of the Labour Party to become registered supporters. Sounds like you're spending more time doing analysis of those who'd signed up.
Well, listen, the system doesn't work. It clearly needs changing. And that's the simple fact of it. It hasn't got us where we need to be.
Right, but what do you say to people who have come into the Labour Party? I mean, it has swelled the ranks of the Labour Party. Not all of them are infiltrators. Not all of them are there to make mischief with this particular system. And you have said yourself, if Jeremy Corbyn wins, you are going to give him a chance. So, I mean, is this not positive politics?
Well, I think we have to keep it positive. I think you're absolutely right. We have to look at how it's run, see how it's worked, see whether it needs changing. We adapt these systems all the time, and this is a system that will be adapted again. Right,
and Simon Danczuk is in I mean, Alan Milburn described Ed Miliband's ghastly experiment, he said, has allowed the Labour Party to tank to the left.
Well, this is an experiment which Modernisers has actually been calling for about 20 years, ever since John Smith's one member, one vote reforms. This was a culmination of that movement from Modernisers. And I'm sorry if Alan's saying that, but these reforms were backed full-heartedly by Tony Blair, by Baroness Smith, John Smith's widow, and I'm just astonished that so many people in the Labour Party have spent time whinging about the rules rather than doing what Jeremy Corbyn's campaign was, actually making the rules work for them.
Do you think it's going to lead, despite what Simon Danczuk has said about supporting Jeremy Corbyn if he wins, or whoever it is who has the job of unifying this party, is it going to lead to a schism, a split in the party?
I hope not. I mean, the history of the Labour Party has been marked by two great schisms led by the right. Both of them have achieved nothing other than prolonged Conservative rule. So I think if Jeremy Corbyn wins, and it is still an if, Labour Party should have recognised that he's won fair and square by the rules. And Modernisers and mainstream Labour Party supporters should actually begin to work within the system to recognise that they are many, the far left are few, and sign up more people so the next time they win.
Do you think there will be a split?
No, I don't think so. I think from speaking to colleagues all of this week and the Parliamentary Labour Party meeting last night, there is a strong sense, a desire for consensus to work within the system and to support the leader, whoever is elected on Saturday.
Simon Danczuk said Ed Miliband made lots of mistakes. He was disastrous, not just about the rules, that he was a disastrous leader for Labour because of the election result. What do you say to that?
I think it was always extremely difficult trying to be a one-term opposition after a long period of government. I think it's a considerable achievement in many ways through the last Parliament to have stayed competitive, to have stayed more or less credible and electable throughout that period. But I do recognise mistakes were made. Everyone involved in that campaign should accept their burden of responsibility. So should backbench Labour MPs who spent a lot of time carping from the sidelines.
Simon Danczuk, thank you. So much for the future Labour leader. But what can the party learn from the previous incumbent's failure, as we were just talking about him? Well, our guest of the day, Tom Baldwin, was Ed Miliband's Director of Communications, and we'll ask him to expand a bit of what he was just talking about in just a moment. But first, a reminder of some of Ed Miliband's more controversial moments in the run-up to this year's general election.
We're ready. Labour's plan for Britain's future. Let's make it happen together. Thank you very much.
It was a grim-faced Ed Miliband who strode from the conference hall after his big speech. His critics had already noticed his failure to mention the deficit in a speech which lasted more than an hour, with the Chancellor tweeting about what he called an extraordinary omission.
I'm not a pacifist, so I did support action in Libya, and David Cameron talked about how I supported action against ISIS. But am I tough enough? Hell yes, I'm tough enough.
Weaponised does seem to a lot of people rather a cynical word to use about the NHS.
Well, I think what's infuriated the Prime Minister...
Can I just ask, did you use it?
Well, I don't recall exactly what I said, but what I'm clear about is that we're in a fight for the NHS.
Right.
And I think that's really important. These 6 pledges are now carved in stone. We will restore faith in politics by delivering what we promised at this general election.
The infamous Ed Stone. Happy memories or not, Tom Baldwin, 4 months on from the general election. Have you recovered?
Yeah, I'm having a very nice summer, thank you very much.
Yes, I'm sure you are. So you're obviously thinking about the future but haven't made any decisions yet, or have you?
No, I'm very happy to be here today, though.
All right. Now, look, there's been plenty written, as you know, about why Labour lost that election. Let's go back, if you like, to one of the core arguments that was discussed and debated, and that was about how to deal with the Conservative claim that Labour wrecked the economy, that they were, in part, to blame for the crash that happened. Was there a debate between you and your colleagues about how to deal with what was described as the great myth? I think it was the great Tory deception over the deficit. And did you devise a campaign, a week-long campaign, that would involve the whole shadow cabinet to deal with that, and it never happened?
Look, there were 3 ways you could try and deal with a kind of big lie which had been established actually in the last leadership campaign, that somehow, you know, Labour spending on schools and hospitals in Britain had caused the Lehman Brothers to go bust in New York, which was obviously nonsense. You either confront it head on, say this is a lie, have a week-long campaign, you know, charts, experts, or you concede that, yes, at the very top of the economic cycle, we were spending a little bit too much, but that doesn't explain the deficit, which was that much.
And what was your view?
Well, there's a third option, was to try and convince people that big spending's a great thing, we should have more of it, and if Jeremy Corbyn wins the leadership, then perhaps we're going to hear that strategy, see that strategy. My view is that we should have confronted it head on. It was a lie, and I think we should have tried to deal with that very early on.
But it didn't happen, did it? I mean, as you said, with all sort of, you know, bells ringing, you didn't do that campaign, did you, in the way that you envisaged?
No.
Why not?
There were disagreements about whether we should be focusing on a Tory attack message or whether we should be talking about our own message. I think there were disagreements within the shadow cabinet, even within Ed's own team, about whether that was the correct strategy.
Right. I mean, did Ed Miliband agree with you and your strategy on dealing with it?
Well, Ed did an article for the Times taking it head on. I think perhaps we could have done more.
There was division then, as you say, in the shadow cabinet, but would you agree that in the end Labour never did regain the public's trust, or not enough of the public's trust, on the economy? And who would you blame for that?
Well, I think we all take responsibility for what went wrong, and clearly we were behind the Conservative Party on economic credibility, despite the fact that the Conservatives had handled the economy extremely badly and changed course dramatically in the middle of the last Parliament. But yeah, we did not deal with the economic credibility issue. There was always a tension, you've got to understand, between credibility, being credible, and being radical. It's not just enough to do what we did in '97, which was reassure people that we could run the economy. There are a lot of angry people out there in the electorate, and we also had to offer change. And that tension between credible and radical was something I don't think we ever quite dealt with.
Let's sort of come closer to the election campaign and talk about some of the decisions that were taken, some of the briefings that were given, some of the headlines that came out that were very controversial at the time. We used one of them in the film, weaponising the NHS. Was that your briefing? Was that a briefing that came out and the word, in the end, if you like, was used then as a gift for the Tories?
Well, I think this is from Nick Robinson's account of a private meeting with senior editors at the BBC, which was intended to be off the record. Ed says he doesn't remember saying it. Nick remembers him saying it, and it's now become established fact.
Right. Was it a mistake to use it, even if it was, as you said, an off-the-record briefing, weaponising the NHS?
Well, we certainly made no apology for battling and fighting to save the NHS, because I think the NHS was at risk and is at risk from this Conservative government.
Right. There was another moment which you were reportedly responsible for, and that was comparing Mr Miliband's attack on the Conservative donor, Stanley Fink, as a tax avoider to his earlier decision to challenge Rupert Murdoch following allegations about phone hacking when Millie Dowler was missing. Did you use that comparison?
Well, this was another Nick Robinson exclusive. I think Nick has accepted that I did not use that phrase.
Did you make any sort of comparison? Or
Well, what I was trying to say was that difference in scale and substance, but in terms of recognising that the public had a deep, deep concern about something that they knew was going wrong, be it with the press or be it with tax avoidance, Ed did have a skill and a talent for cutting through and recognising it as such. But to compare Stanley Fink to what Stanley Fink did to what News International did to Millie Dowler, no, that's not a comparison I made, and Nick Robinson accepts that.
were these mistakes, do you think, during the campaign? Were these things that marred the campaign in a way? Because at the time, I know the polls weren't correct, but at the time, you clearly thought Ed Miliband could win.
Well, I think we had a good campaign. I think I think the election was lost actually in the 5 years preceding, or even the 10 years preceding.
Which you were still involved in, obviously.
We take full responsibility for that. I don't think it was a fault of the campaign. I think in many ways, kind of counterintuitively, if we'd had a worse campaign, we might have got a slightly different result. The focus of everyone in those final 2 or 3 weeks was on the prospect of a Labour SNP government. This was the great scare story which the Tory party was pushing, repeated verbatim on the BBC and other media outlets over and over again. It was very, very difficult to get people to focus on the risk of a Tory second term or even a Tory majority.
But that was your fault, wasn't it?
Well, I think it's the fault of the polls, I think it's the fault of the media, and obviously our fault for not winning the argument.
What was the thinking behind the Edstone? We played it there in the film, there it is, a better plan, a better future. Was that a mistake?
Well, I don't think it was our finest hour. But
who came up with that?
We take responsibility, collective responsibility for these things. But the point of it was, actually, we're trying to find any way, any means possible to get the media off this relentless loop that they were in on Labour SNP deals, the process story of what might or might not happen.
We wanted
people to
focus
on our agenda and our policies and our positive offer. It may not have been the best attempt to do it, but the motive was right.
All right, well, we'll leave it there on Not Your Finest Moment, as you said. Tom Baldwin, thank you.